Injury crisis. It's what John Eustace has to deal with. And what is he going to do heading into Coventry? We're going to discuss everything about Derby County and the injuries they're facing at the moment. And it's a real difficult patch for not just Derby County, but also for John Eustace. And it's something which really needs to be looked at as soon as possible. Now, obviously, John Eustace and his coaching staff will be focusing on the next game and trying to chase survival in the Championship. But he's going to have to do it with his hands tied behind his back. With no transfer window and a lack of real quality free agents available, Derby County are in a really difficult position right now. With news over the weekend breaking that Lars-Jørgen Selvesund has had to have an operation and is out for the season. Ben Osborne is potentially done for the season. Ryan Niambi and Kmart Roof are set to miss up to 6 weeks. It's a really difficult situation that Derby County find themselves in. And it gets even worse when you think that Sondre Langas had to go off with a potential issue on Saturday afternoon, as well as Harrison Armstrong. Now, Sondre Langas is set to go for a potential scan over the course of the next few days, so he's probably not going to be involved on Tuesday night. And it's a very difficult circumstance that Derby County find themselves in. And the situation falls on a few different people for me. If you go back 3 years to the year before we got relegated in administration, Derby County have never been a team that suffers lots of little niggly injuries, 4 to 6 weeks injuries. We've always had those major ones, 3 months, 6 months, 12-month injuries. You look at Craig Forsyth, he's had, 3 years out with broken legs, torn ACLs and things like that. You go to George Thorne, I think he did his ACL twice, broke his leg twice. Marcus Olsen. There's loads of other players that we've had that have had major injuries. Will Hughes was another one back in and around sort of that Steve McLaren era. And you look at the history of Derby County, and what I'm going to do over the course of the next few weeks is I'm going to put a video together talking about Derby County's injury history and what we've seen this year, because I think this year it's been over the top. I even think last year was bad as well. And I personally think it comes down to the training methods that were employed during pre-season under Paul Warne. The way he used to work them into the ground during pre-season was one of the reasons why we started season so slowly. And then as the fixtures sort of built up and we had more and more games, so we had less and less training, the team seemed to get fitter and play better. But then as soon as we got back to where we had periods of time without games, the team just used to look knackered again. And I personally believe that there's a lot of reasons why Derby County are suffering these injuries. I think the radical change of the medical department over the course of the summer was a massive reason. But I also believe that it also falls onto training methods. Paul Warne was massive on fitness, massive on how much you ran and things like that. And I think that's one of the reasons why we've seen so many hamstring injuries and muscle injuries over the course of this season. You look at David Ozo was the first major one we saw. But if you go even further back to pre-season, we lost Jake Rooney to a meniscus tear. We lost Corey Blackett-Taylor and Joe Ward to muscle injuries. Kane Wilson and Callum Elder picked up injuries during pre-season as well. So did Ryan Niambi. And we look at those sorts of injuries before the season even started, and I personally think that instantly raises red flags. You then look, as we've gone through the season, Dejan Brown's had a couple of injuries, Elder's had a few more, Fozzie's had a few, Nelson's obviously done his ACL, Cashin had an injury, and he's a player who realistically throughout his entire career hasn't really picked up any real injuries. Niambi's had a couple in season now. Kane Wilson's had a couple. Dejan Brown, I think I've already mentioned. We now obviously look at Ben Osborne, and he's had a few. We've brought in Kmart Roof, and he's been here, 2 weeks, and has picked up an injury. Sondre Langas and Armstrong, potential injuries as well. And I do think that a lot of it goes to working the legs and things like that. I think with Armstrong, I do believe that his was more cramp than a real proper injury, so I'm hoping he's still going to be available on Tuesday night. But you look at, like, Selvesund came in and I think he started his first game like a week after he signed, which I thought, given the fact he hadn't had a pre-season, was a bit ridiculous. And he's played practically every game at some point since. And it's very difficult for Selvesund, for Langas, who have come in from teams that have been on a winter break. As they were heading back into pre-season, they come and join Derby, and then they're playing full-paced competitive games. And yes, we've seen quality from both of them, but ultimately, them picking up injuries is the reason why they haven't had proper setups to get into the team. They've sort of just been, we're in the shit, throw them in. And yes, I get the situation that we were in and that they were needed, but you have to have that conversation with yourself of, realistically, they shouldn't have probably started a game for 4 weeks. Because if you go through pre-season, it's a 2-month period from the end of June well, it's not even 2 months, is it? It's about 6 weeks from the end of June to the start of August when the first competitive game starts. And what did Langas have? A week? I think he started his first game a week after he signed. I think he'd done parts of pre-season at Viking. Selverson, I don't even think had even started pre-season when he came, and he was I think he played 20 minutes a week after he signed, then started the game after, which is fair enough. We needed players and we needed to push forward, but it's always then a risk. Ben Osborne has been sort of injury riddled over this season, and I think again that's because of the style of play we've been playing and the way they've been trained, with a lot of focus on running, sort of unneeded, unnecessary running, and obviously that will obviously have been translated in training as well. So you're looking at players who are sort of getting towards the back end of their careers in Ben Osborne and ultimately are doing more running than they've probably done their entire career. And obviously, yes, we need players that are fit and able to run and last games, but the way that we were working to be an off-the-ball team ultimately was never going to work for an older head, which is exactly why Paul wanted youth and athleticism in the team, because they could probably contend with it a lot more. Now, even though we've seen that the youth in our team haven't really been able to contend with it either. And that's sort of the disappointing fact that we've seen across the course of this season, is that young or old, they've struggled with the intensity of whatever Paul Warne was doing, or the amount of what Paul Warne was doing. Now, we've heard over the last few days that John Eustace has made training shorter but sharper, which I think is massively important. I don't think we need to be doing, say, 2-hour sessions to sort of drill into these players what we need. We need players that are going to be doing an hour short and sharp of what they know they're going to do on the weekend. Because I think there was a study done where every footballer in professional football, the average they touched the ball was for something like, I think it was 3 minutes a game. So obviously you spend the most part of a football game off the ball. And you need to be fit for that, but you also need to be able to do what you need to do when you get the ball. You need to make sure you can keep concentrated and keep consistent. And obviously, ball's in play for 60 minutes a game? I think it was worked out a few years ago, whatever it was, which is why they want to bring in a stop clock, which I don't necessarily think is a bad idea. But if the ball's in play for 60 minutes, you don't need to do 2-hour training sessions of running tactics, transition play, crosses. You just need to do 60 minutes where you don't stop, focus is on. And you have to keep concentrated and keep following what is going on, whether it be tactical, whether it be a set piece session or anything like that. And realistically, if you go shorter and sharper, the players are less likely to get in the red zone. They're less likely to pick up niggles and injuries in training. Obviously, yes, we've picked up a few this week, but you've got the carry-on from how the season started and what we did up until the end of February. Well, the first week of February when Paul Warne was sacked, and obviously then for the 2 weeks following that when Matt Hamshaw and Andy Warrington would have took the team, which would have probably been a longer similar basis of training and styles and things like that. And that's sort of the problem we've seen with Derby County over the last few years, is that the players just die. And it's as if the manager sort of gave them the leeway to die at 60 minutes. I want them to gas out. A player can say they've gassed out. They might not have gassed out, but because the manager says that after 60 minutes you can gas out and come off, you're gassed out. And that's what Derby County don't need. They need players that their heads are in the game for the full game, no matter what. And that's what we need to see an improvement on over the course of towards the end of this season. A massive win versus Blackburn at the weekend. And this is where we get into how John Eustace is going to sort of pass up and be able to bring new people and new blood into the team to be able to help survive. Now, we saw on the bench at the weekend young players in Jake Rooney, Charles Abuka, Owen Eames and Lennon Wilden. Now, could we see Cruz Allen introduced? Could we see a player like Morton Spencer, Freddie Turley introduced into the first team as well over the course of the next few weeks, given the injuries that we have? Obviously, one that I haven't mentioned is Joe Ward, who's sort of been out all season with his knee, and we still don't really know what's going on. He spent a lot of time on the bench, he's played a couple of games, but ultimately never really been a consistent figure. He's been in and out with that sort of knee issue that he's had, and obviously getting back to sort of these youth opportunities. Freddie Turley's a player who can play at right back, who can play in midfield. You've also got the likes of Jack Perry, who's pretty similar in that sense. Obviously, Lennon Wheeldon can play left, right, and through the middle, which is massively important. Owen Eames can play as a sitter, an 8, a number 10. You obviously then go to Jake Rooney, who can play centre back, right back, holding midfield, and you've got players there who could add something to this Derby County side. Whether it be an instant impact, I don't know, and obviously, we've got to find a way to sort of fill out the squad with these issues we've got. Obviously, the introduction of Jeff Hendrick will probably come at Plymouth. It would be nice to see it happen at Coventry against Coventry. Would nice to have him on the bench and give him 15 minutes, but obviously we've got to make sure that we bring him in correctly. And obviously, with the international break coming up, if he can get, say, 15, 20 minutes at Plymouth and then have like a 2-week intense pre-season to be back for, I think it's Preston at home coming out of the international break, and he can potentially then start games. I think that would be a really, really good opportunity for Derby County. So there's big players that we could look at in the youth academy. There's obviously the introduction of Jeff Hendrick still to come. So it's going to be interesting to see what John Eustace does. I do believe that over the course of the next few weeks, we're going to see some young lads pick up some debuts, because we're going to have to, because we're in a situation where we're missing, 8 or 9 players now. I'll put up a depth chart on the screen of the players that are available and the players that are injured, and I'll have sort of a section of academy players who I think could sort of be involved. Now, the interesting question is going to be, when's Niall McAndrew back from injury? When is, obviously, Cruz Allen back? So obviously he picked up a knock in the West Ham Cup game, so that's one to keep an eye on as well. Will be very interesting to see what does happen. If you have not done so already, hit that subscribe button. Drop a ram in the comments, as well as letting me know your thoughts if you've hit this part of the video. And let me know your thoughts, because it's going to be very, very interesting. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and I'll catch you in my next video tomorrow.